the Mount Carmel compound, is outside Waco. Like, you have to drive for quite a while to get there. A good few minutes. It's in the sticks. And apparently it's not even all that easy. It wasn't all that easy to find. When the ATF drove out there, they had to ask directions. So that gives you an idea. It's a little bit remote. And they've got this compound of a few big buildings. I'll just leave the description for that for a moment. Go back to his early life. He goes out, he finds David Koresh, or Vernon Howell, finds himself out there. And for a while, and there's like a community of couple hundred people, I think, at most. He just sort of tries and joins in. He's not obviously not immediately their leader or anything. And to begin with, he doesn't seem, people said he didn't seem particularly special. He's just another person that had come along, was helping out in the community, sort of, trying to help build things and just trying to help in all sorts of ways and going to the sermons they put on. The sort of nominal leader of it was a widower, Lois Roden. Her husband had been the leader of them, but he'd died of natural causes a few years before. And so she was sort of the de facto leader of them, Lois Roden. She was about 67 when Koresh turns up. And she had a son called George Roden, who obviously thought of himself as the next in line. If and when his mother should pass away, he would become the leader of the community, of the group, of the Branch Davidians.
So they have a sort of inherited leadership then, it seems, rather than...
Well, that's what George Roden had in mind.
Mm-hmm.
George Roden was mad. Actually mad, though. I mean, his nickname was the Madman of Waco.
And if you're a madman amongst those people, you really must be mad, right?
Well, he later goes on... Well, let me quickly tell you what happened here. Just super quick go through this. David Koresh worms his way into the inner sanctum of Lois Roden's circle, then beds her, has a sexual relationship with her, which everyone was like...
Very Christian.
Yeah, because she's an old lady. 67, 68, whatever.
So he's doing the political strategy of sleeping your way to the top.
Well, he's the sinful Messiah, you see. So he's not without sin. He never claimed he was immaculate or perfect. Anyway, he beds Lois Roden. George Roden's not really happy with that. Lois Roden starts promoting Koresh, saying Howell, as he was then, Vernon Howell's going to start doing sermons. Everyone at the community should listen to Vernon's sermons. And Vernon Howell, ever since he was young, was very, very into the Bible. He knew a lot about theology. And like I said, I think, had he already been to Israel, he could already speak with, in inverted commas, authority, all about the book of Revelations and everything. So in that sense, he sort of hit the ground running, if you like. If you believe he is just a con man, a snake oil salesman type, if you go for that, then he was sort of good at it from the get-go, already capable of doing that. The gift of the gab, being able to persuade people, all sorts of things.
I don't think that, given that he was brought up in that tradition, I don't think he was consciously deceiving people.
Maybe. I suspect he believed a lot of it himself.
I think he was deceiving himself, maybe, but not deliberately going out of his way to deceive others.
I think, like a lot of these things, like someone like Joan of Arc, I believe they believed it.
Mm.
It might look or seem completely off the main beam, looking in at it from the outside, but they themselves believed it, I think. I think that. But yeah, like ever since he was a child, listening to preachers and stuff, he was sort of brought up in that tradition that you give sort of persuasive sermons about things to a flock of credulous people. There you go. But George Roden didn't like this. He eventually sort of forced... Koresh got a sort of a personal following within the Branch Davidians that sort of followed him and his word. He came up with this thing called the new light philosophy or something. What did he call it? I think it was the new light. his philosophy was the new revelation, all about the 7 seals and things. Some people started to follow him specifically. When he and George Roden, who was a dangerous man, and everyone's gun-toting in Texas, they had some sort of, it came to a head, and I'll just keep calling him David Koresh rather than Vernon Howe. David Koresh decides he's going to leave Mount Vernon with some of his followers that are prepared to follow him personally. He's going to leave because it's going to come to...
That's a surprisingly good decision, actually, I think.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances.
Yeah. So he does. He leaves and he goes to a place called Palestine, Texas, out in the pine woods.
Of course.
There's a power struggle between David Koresh and George Roden, and he leaves with a handful of followers, and they live in sort of school buses and tents out in the woods, in the pine woods, out in Palestine, Texas. But then it all goes, just to cut ahead a bit, it all goes south for George Roden in a completely unconnected thing to David Koresh. He murders someone.
That'll do it, yeah.
Put an axe through their head. He used to be his ex-flatmate, I believe. Details of that.
That makes sense already. Having been in flat shares many times,
right?
I've had my sympathies.
He's the madman of Waco, and he was convicted of murder, and but he wasn't even put in a normal prison. They put him in like a hospital for the criminally insane. Well, he was under the protection of the Texas Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation's Dangerous Review Board. So at the beginning, when I said, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, okay.
When I said at the beginning, I think some of these people are retarded in a very literal sense. Well, George Roden, the authorities thought that. He died. He tried to escape a few times, or did escape a few times, always to be recaptured quite quickly. And
it's a bit embarrassing for the people guarding him, isn't it? It's like, yeah, this guy, clearly mentally ill, also outwitted us. How does that happen?
He escaped a couple of times. One of the times he got all the way to New York and was apprehended outside the Jewish embassy in New York trying to get to Israel.
What, from Texas?
Yep.
Across the country?
Yep.
Blimey.
Yeah, he escaped for a good few days, and that's where he was eventually found.
He made a good run of it then.
Yeah, not bad, right? Anyway, in the end, a few years after this, he just died of a heart attack. He was a really fat man. Very, very, very obese man. Anyway, he died of a heart attack. And anyway, ever since he was arrested for that murder, David Koresh returns to Mount Carmel as sort of the reigning, defending, undisputed champion of the Branch Davidians. He's their leader now. Just absolutely their leader. And so for the next, 8 years, 9 years, he runs it. He's the king of it. And he's sort of, it's one of the things he's always wanted. That's what a lot of people say. He wants to be a rock star, and he wants to be a leader of men. He wants the power over people. And there's it's well over 100 people, 150, 100 people in this community, in this compound. And they were pretty much peaceful, really. They had loads and loads of weapons. I'll get into that in a sec. They were peaceful. They weren't going around disturbing other people and other communities and causing trouble in Waco. Nothing like that.
For Texas, though, is it? I mean, everyone has loads of weapons in Texas, from what I imagine. Well,
let's talk about the weapons thing, because it's going to come up. They needed to make money, right? And so they had loads of sort of little side projects, little grifts, little businesses, legit businesses, all sorts of things. There was one, they did like little car repair shop. Like whoever in the community had a skill, they tried to...
Well, it's like a commune, isn't it, really?
Right, yeah. Originally, there was loads of sort of separated huts and houses that had been there since the 50s. David Koresh says, right, we're going to demolish all of those and build one big complex of a building. And that's what they did. And anyway, yeah, they ran all sorts of little businesses. There were one woman was a seamstress and made a bit of money doing that and all sorts of things. One of the things they did was weapons. And they had another building about 2 miles away from the main Waco compound, the main Mount Carmel compound, which was basically like a gun shop. And they would go to loads of gun shows. They would buy like second-hand weapons and then refurbish them, do them up a bit, and sell them on at gun shows or sell them in their gun store.
That really is doing the Lord's work.
And that is completely legal in Texas. All that sort of thing is legal. So later on, the authorities would describe the Branch Davidians as having stockpiled weapons. Well, was it a stockpile of weapons, or was it just the inventory of their business? Because that's what the others would say. They would say, you can call it a stockpile if you want, but we're calling it the inventory. But
if you view it from hindsight's perspective, the temptation would be, well, of course they were stockpiling weapons because they had that siege. But if you go back before that, I imagine they didn't expect to get in any altercations. Now the crazy axe man is gone. They don't really have any need for them. It's Texas, right? So they're probably not going to come up against much resistance with their kind of isolationist way of life anyway.
I think that's exactly what they hoped. Yeah. I mean, if the authorities hadn't tried to storm their complex, there was no evidence that they were planning to do anything crazy violent.
They're basically minding their own business.
Effectively, yeah. But, well, we can get into details of that, what's been alleged against them. And a lot of this story, when we get into the really contentious things, is it's just different people's word. We don't know. You don't know what was in people's minds. You don't know what they might have done in the future. One quick last story about George Roden, the madman. At one point, after David Koresh and his followers had gone and lived somewhere else in Palestine, Texas, he offered a challenge to David Koresh. He exhumed the body of a woman, Anna Hughes. He exhumed her body, and he invited David Koresh to resurrect her to prove that he was, in fact, a Messiah, not the Messiah.
So he might have been mad, but he was at least somewhat credulous then. Or incredulous, sorry.
Right, yeah.
Getting them mixed up now. I said it far more times than I normally do.
There's a logic there, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a sound logic, but there's a logic. And David Koresh and his followers were like, well, that's desecration of a corpse. That's illegal. So why don't we go there and try and take pictures of it, and then we can send them to the authorities? Well, they told the authorities. They said, Madman Roden, he renamed Mount Carmel Rodenville. Madman Roden is desecrating corpses. And the sheriff was like, if you get me proof of that, I'll start taking it further. I'm not going to investigate. Bit weird, but anyway. So Koresh and his followers go there to try and take pictures, and a shootout occurs between them. And in fact, George Roden got shot in the arm or the finger, some say. No one else was killed. So it wasn't a massive shootout to the death. But there was a shootout there at Mount Carmel.
Someone actually getting hit, I mean, that's serious stuff, isn't it, really?
Reasonably, yeah. And in fact, David Koresh and I think 7 or 8 or 9 of his followers were arrested for that shootout, for gunplay. And they were all and put on trial, and they were all acquitted because their defence was, well, we were doing it in self-defence. Crazy man Roden shot at us first or whatever. Anyway, there was a shootout there years before, a small one, but everyone was acquitted of any criminal wrongdoing in that. Anyway, that's the last I'll talk about George Roden. So, yeah, they're quote-unquote stockpiling weapons. And now, again, you're totally allowed to do that in Texas. It's not a problem. They had a gun range at the compound where people that had nothing to do with the Branch Davidians would come and shoot at the gun range. Again, just normal. That's just sort of normal in Texas. It's not a problem whatsoever. Now, having said that, even having a massive inventory stockpile of weapons is okay if you've got a license, and one of them did, a full license to be a gun seller and go to gun shows and have all sorts of guns, up to and including sort of 50 cal rifles and stuff. But there are still limits, even in Texas. There's certain things that are still illegal.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.